Oh my gosh, what the boys in production whipped up today. Can you believe that? Doja Cat feet. Today. We get to talk about it. What a job. Thank you for bringing this to me. Can I say that? Thank you. I appreciate you. This is important. This is an important topic.
Sorry, is that this week? Guys, we're not doing Doja Cat feet this week.
The thing is, I thought it was dead in the water. I thought, Doja Cat up and down. The feet is evergreen. Because we keep finding groypers. I wonder if there's maybe there's a play there. I don't know. Groypers, feet.
So,
4chan feet.
Hassan, I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
Are you guys working on that 4chan feet?
Hassan,
a little alliteration?
Hassan, Doja Cat is not this week. It's next week. Do you not remember what we're doing this week?
Well, then, Saji, what are we talking about today if it's not about Doja Cat's feet? What do you think we're talking about?
I'd love to get to it. Thanks. We're interviewing the student that was present at the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Are you sure we can't?
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Mainstream Media. I'm Saji Sharma.
And I'm Hassan Fields.
Let's get straight to the point. We obviously like to have fun with this channel, but this is serious, and we appreciate your support as we broach this very sensitive topic. A few weeks ago, a political commentator, Charlie Kirk, was assassinated at a Turning Point USA event at Utah Valley University on September 10th.
The assailant, Tyler James Robinson, is currently in custody and no doubt being questioned about the nature of this heinous act.
According to local authorities, over 3,000 students were present and in between Charlie Kirk and this would-be assassin during one of his debating events. And we were actually able to speak to one of those students that was there when it happened.
This is a very different type of interview from mainstream media. This is an actual person who is there, verified, boots on the ground, and in the midst of the fray.
Here's our interview. To kind of get started, we just wanted to sort of ask how long you've been at the university.
Okay, yeah. I've been going to UVU for about, I guess this would be the start of my second year. So I've not been going there for too long, but
Gotcha.
Awesome. What's day to day? What would you say the average day at the university is like?
um, I'd say well, it's a very big university. It's open enrollment, and so it's like the biggest campus in Utah and also a pretty large student body. So you just kind of go to your classes. I don't know. It's like a pretty average college experience as far as I don't know, I'm aware, but
Gotcha.
yeah, it's like being a student there is kind of like you do just kind of get lost in the sea of everything because there's just a lot happening on campus most of the time.
Awesome.
Interesting.
And when you speak to the things that go on, is it like is there a sports culture? Is there like a lot of extracurriculars? What does the average student kind
Um,
of do to fill out
Their
their
time,
experience?
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot. I would say the sports culture is probably not as prevalent at UVU just because the big sports culture is with Brigham Young University. But there is a lot happening, they have a lot of different programs. There's a ton of clubs at UVU, including Turning Point USA, obviously. And so when you're walking down the halls, there's constantly people tabling different clubs, and there are sport events, but I wouldn't say they're as big as some of the other universities here.
Gotcha.
It's just a very bustling campus usually.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. On the topic of the energy at the school, I'm curious to know because you did mention a lot of clubs. I'm interested to
hmm
know the sort of political energy at the school and how that that is on a day-to-day basis and how that feels, sort of.
I have family members that work at the school, so it's not like I was never on UVU campus before. I mean, I've lived in Utah for a while, but I would say that my experience of campus before I was a student and in the past few years, it's definitely felt a lot more politically charged than it has
Mm,
in the past few years. I think a lot of that just has to do with Utah legislation has been really coming down on universities. The LGBTQ center was shut down in the
Hmm.
past year, as well as the like multicultural center and like the women's success center. And so the leaning in campus has definitely been leaning more conservative than it has in the past. In the past, it was kind of like a neutral campus just because there was a lot of like students coming from outside of Utah and also students that were like residents of Utah. And so, but I think it's definitely been leaning more conservative. As far as clubs are concerned, it's hard
Gotcha.
to be on campus and not know about Turning Point USA because they're tabling nearly every single day in one of
Mhm.
like the busiest hallways on campus. And they definitely are one of the better funded clubs at this school. I know I
Mhm.
have friends that work in clubs that are also backed by organizations and they like very often get denied time for tabling for no reasons
And then time.
when yeah,
Gotcha.
the Turning Point USA is always in the hallway.
So it sounds like, or excuse me, is there an alternative, or is there like a real base that is an alternative to these Turning Point USA tables, to these tables that are leaning more conservative? Like, I'm just curious about whether or not the students have like a plethora of options as they're kind of, navigating this.
Mm, I would say definitely before this past year and before, like I said, like all of these resources for like minority groups on campus got closed down, that there was definitely like more of a sort of like balanced voice or just more resources for like where to go if you're not like a conservative student, but it's definitely been a lot harder to find any sort of like, I don't know, space in between like conservative and other groups. And also just like because I'm like a queer student myself and
Mhm.
like just am in community with a lot of people at my school like that. Like there are clubs that are like I know there's like a pro-Palestine club at my school and there's like an LGBTQ club, but it definitely feels like their voices are not as heard out as Turning Point USA's is or as more conservative culture is in the school. I think just especially over this last year, it's a lot harder if you're like a queer student or like immigrant or things like that to find resources at my school, especially since they shut them all down in the past year.
Yeah.
It's like becoming increasingly more difficult.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I have a question just about not necessarily the incident itself, but about the time up until the event. I'm curious as
Mm,
to the energy everyone felt at the school when they knew about the event, about when Charlie Kirk would be there. I can assume that there was probably a lot more excitement in the air at that school specifically. But
Yeah, as far as like, I remember when they were starting to announce it, Turning Point USA had a giant cardboard cutout of his face in the hallway, and they were kind of like, if the energy felt like, because I was like sitting there and watching them set up, and then they had their giant cardboard cutout, and the energy was kind of like, "Hey, Charlie Kirk's coming to our campus," and students were stopping and going like, "Really? UVU? Like he's coming here? Like okay." And I think people they kind of did it obviously for shock value, which is what a lot of TPUSA tabling events at my school are, is kind of to just like, make noise in the
yes.
hallway. But they were definitely um trying to go like or get students to like have some sort of like crazy reaction to it, which I don't think anyone really did.
Mhm.
But I don't know, as far as like advertising, I didn't see much of it around campus, like them talking about it, but that has a lot more to do with like a lot of the DEI legislation about clubs specifically has impacted the way that clubs can operate at my school a lot, just because I am involved with like some clubs like on a higher up level.
Mhm.
The university isn't technically allowed to endorse any clubs anymore because, putting their eggs in any political basket would get them fined like
Yeah.
so fucking much from the state. So Turning Point USA couldn't make too much of a fuss about it because they were technically just like renting the fountain courtyard, so to speak, where it's just like their event just happened to take place in the courtyard, but the school wasn't officially hosting it. So there wasn't as much advertising about it as there were just like other school events. I think something that felt weird about this event, though, is that, but understandable, is that like when other conservative politicians or political figures have come to campus in the past, there has been a, albeit small, but there has been a force of students that like want to protest
Mhm.
or want to have some sort of demonstration at this event. But when I like kind of put my feelers out for like, okay, Charlie Kirk's coming to campus, like, are we gonna protest? Or are we gonna demonstrate? Like, what's the feel? It very much felt like people did not want to touch this event with a 10-foot pole if they weren't a conservative. Like Charlie Kirk came to UVU in like 2019, I think. I don't know if they
Mhm.
had a protest then, but like those people that would have been doing something like that at this event just did not feel safe demonstrating or really doing anything like that just because, the school has just been cracking down so much more on voices that are not conservatives in the past year that I think people just felt kind of like a lot of trepidation and like this is kind of dipping into more of like the events of the day, but the crowd there was like not as many students as I was expecting. It was obviously the Turning Point USA people at UVU, but it was also the BYU Turning Point people because he wasn't stopping at their
That's
school. And it was also
interesting.
there was also a lot of like just families there. Like people like from the community that heard that Charlie Kirk was coming and were like taking it as like a day out with the family to go and see him
Mhm.
speak at the school.
This almost brought all of the collegiate TP people in Utah, or at least in the surrounding area, to this
This
Hmm.
event.
event. Yeah, it was like, okay,
Yeah, especially the people in Provo and Orem, because his next stop was up in Logan, which is about a 3-hour drive north from here
gotcha.
at Utah State University. And so there was a lot of BYU people there, like a lot more than I was expecting. But it does make sense because, I don't know personally about BYU's Turning Point chapter, but I mean, it's Brigham Young University. I imagine their club at that school is rather big just because that's like the conservative school in my state.
Gotcha,
And
gotcha.
so, yeah.
Leading up to this, this trepidation around demonstrating was
Hmm.
was this based off of, your own research, or what was the impetus of that uncomfortable underlying feeling?
I think like our uncomfortable feelings towards demonstrating were largely just because of how conservative campus is getting, because we figured that there would be like a ton of security there, which we can talk about this later, but there was like no security there at all. But we expected it to be like a pretty high security event because it's Charlie Kirk coming to our university. And I think also just like I know that this didn't get as much, obviously, as much mainstream media, but like the last kind of big protest that was in Utah was the No Kings protest, where like a guy was shot and killed
Hmm.
at that protest. And so, and my a lot of my friends had been there, and so we just kind of felt like nervous about it, just in the way that most people have felt nervous about protesting in the past year in the country. And so I think that's why we didn't demonstrate. There were some students that were there demonstrating. There was about like maybe a crowd of like 20 people that was up on the balcony above him that like they had like a pride flag and they were like yelling things at him, but like at the event, like campus security, the two campus police officers that were actually there were only there to make sure that these protesters didn't get in Charlie Kirk's shot for any of his press. So they were kind of like off to the side, and but like I feel like even then, like when I did go up there and talk to them for a little bit, it seemed like they were all definitely nervous too
Gotcha.
of like being there. So it was just like that's just kind of how the vibe has been on campus lately
Yeah.
and just like in general with protesting.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. When you were at the event, and because you were saying that, it wasn't a big turnout with your own school. I'm curious as to know your reaction to the energy of the crowd, and if you felt a lot more unsafe while you were there than the idea of it in the first place, I guess.
Oh yeah, I think that because my school is not like the conservative school, I don't know what I was expecting because it's Charlie Kirk,
Yeah.
but I was not expecting like the absolute like sea of MAGA hats that I saw the second that I pulled up to the event. I was expecting it to be a very conservative crowd, but I was not expecting it to be as like blatantly and openly conservative as I
Yeah.
think it was. People did all show up in their MAGA hats. They had American flags. Some of the people in the main crowd up at the front of where he was like sitting had like a cardboard, like a Trump cardboard cutout. And like when I mentioned like the protesters that had the LGBTQ flag earlier, they originally were posted up right behind where his like thing was on the balcony above, and then UVU campus police had them like move 10 feet over, and when they pulled the flag up, the whole crowd cheered. And then when they put it back down, the whole crowd booed. And
Mm.
I was just kind of like, I was a little bit gagged. I was like, this is kind of crazy. I
Yeah.
was not expecting, I guess I just wasn't expecting it to be so just like openly hateful.
So the the event in question happens, um,
Hmm.
and we're 2 weeks removed from it at this point. Can you describe kind of how you're feeling in this particular moment in reflection? Not to necessarily put you back there, but
Hmm.
this is a big moment. So, have you been able to digest everything that's happened thus far?
I don't really know when I'll be able to fully like process it, because something that I was something that I found very interesting after like immediately after the event happened and even still now is that like my reaction to it is as if like it was two separate events that happened that day. It was the political assassination that real people were there for and that did witness and it did traumatize. And then it's also the like global news event that people see on their phones. I think that kind of like two sides of the coin where I was seeing like hours after it happened when I had finally gotten home, seeing people like already posting memes about it and just feeling like so weird because I'm like it felt like something that had just happened to me and my friends, because I had just like run away from a very like dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so like seeing like the global reaction to it, seeing like Netanyahu tweet like 30 minutes after it happened or whatever
Yeah.
felt crazy because I'm like it's hard to even process that this was something that happened on my college campus that is not known for anything but people who get rejected from BYU going there. Like
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
it felt crazy seeing like pictures of my campus on the news. And I think even 2 weeks removed from the event, it's interesting because after the event, I kind of just had to get off social media because I was like, I just can't see people posting about it. I can't see the video of it happening over and over again.
Yeah, it's a
And
lot.
like, since then, I have had to drop all of my in-person classes just because I don't feel comfortable going back to campus after it happened. And so, even 2 weeks removed from the event, which it feels like ages ago that it happened, and also like it happened yesterday,
Mhm.
it is interesting seeing my university has obviously not quote unquote moved on from this event in any way whatsoever. Like it is still very much like fresh on everyone's minds. But in a lot of ways, I feel like the internet has kind of moved past it a little bit, where it's just like I don't see people posting about it as much anymore. Like when I do go onto social media, like I don't really see anybody talking about it. But it still feels like something that's very fresh in my mind and it's very fresh in the mind of my community. And it's definitely not something that's going to be forgotten, at least at my university and where I live, for a while. But it is going to be something that moves on, like the internet moves on from.
Yes. Gotcha. I am really curious to know how you feel about the internet kind of expiring past the death of Charlie Kirk versus everyone in your hometown and everyone you know not being able to really do that.
I think some it feels interesting because I couldn't when the event happened, I couldn't really like like immediately after it happened, like all of my friends who are mostly like left-leaning politically started posting their like takes about it. Like
Hmm.
everyone online was just posting like stories on their Instagram about how they felt about his death, whether they were happy or not, or what this meant politically and blah blah blah, which just felt like crazy to me because I'm like, this happened to your friends in your community. Why are we talking about this as if this is something that just happened on your phone? And I can't really blame my friends who like live out of state for like posting memes about it or just like, because it's like they're obviously detached from the event
Yeah.
in the way that most people are. But it feels interesting because like even seeing my friends who were like there while it happened sort of go into their phones and then only be able to talk about the event as if it was something they saw on their phone and not something
Not
that
in
they
real life.
really did
Yeah.
experience, which was interesting. Like it was a weird couple of days having to like sit there and try to do the work of like processing what really happened to us while also like having everyone all the time talking about it. And I think that, and this is like the feeling in my community right now is that since Utah and especially where I live, especially Orem, where my campus is a very conservative community. I think that people are mostly mourning Charlie Kirk. I can't drive down the interstate without seeing a memorial of him on some banner on a bridge or up on some billboard. I don't live too far from campus, so I can't like drive anywhere without going past the giant Charlie Kirk memorial that they have in the roundabout right by my school. It's like
Yeah.
I think that conservatives especially are very upset and feel very much that this is like because it's obviously a tragedy in my community that this had to happen. But I think that also like there is just a lot more anger in the conservatives in my community are very like angry that this happened to Charlie Kirk, their hero. And like in that roundabout where they have the giant Charlie Kirk memorial right by my university,
Gotcha.
there's like a few days after it happened, there was like protesters, I guess. There were just like conservative guys holding signs that say like don't tread on me, like Charlie Kirk is an American hero. But I'm
Hmm.
like, who are you protesting? Like I
Yeah.
think the average person driving past you isn't gonna disagree.
Disagree with that.
And I know like over the country, like with like vigils that have been hosted for him, like there have been like conservative groups that have like been violent towards people that were there like I think I saw like in the news like some guy like yelled like fuck you Charlie out of a window
Hmm.
past one of the vigils and like he got like pulled out of his car like beaten up by conservatives.
Wow.
And so it's like that's kind of like that the vibe of that happening all over the country is here, but I think that whereas like a lot of the vigils like for him have kind of died down around all the places like people are still coming to his vigil every single day up until like about like 5 days ago there was a news truck posted in that roundabout by his memorial 24/7 interviewing people that were coming to his memorial like bringing presents for him. And so I don't think that this is something like I think that like people are obviously just still very upset about it but are definitely using it, and the conservatives in my area are using it as like proof of why they should be so angry at minority groups and proof of why they should be so angry at like, the woke left because they would let something like this happen in their community.
So I'm curious as to if, as a progressive and queer individual, how having to be in a state at an event that is very not queer or progressive, how that makes you feel internally, if at all, if you feel conflicted at all, and just about how the event itself really. I guess in a way has to taint how you feel about your own politics. Because I do know that, or I can assume that having to see and experience a very traumatizing event like this can lead to, just a lot of empathy as it should be. But I'm curious as to if that changed your perception of Charlie Kirk or not.
Um, I'm not too sure if it changed my perception on him. I think it definitely sort of like changed my perception on like my community as a whole, because something that's very like distinctive about Mormons is they all are very conservative, but they are so polite. And so the amount of like reactionary conservative Mormons who will like be openly hateful or in a lot of cases like violent is a lot less than I think in other conservative states, just because like one, there's so many of them, and two, it's like just not really like I don't know, there's obviously like a lot of like very reactionary conservatives where I live, but I think that I'm just like I was just kind of shocked by first of all seeing how many turned up for the event and also seeing just like how much how many more trucks with giant American flags I'm seeing drive down the streets, like seeing people like holding "Don't Tread on Me" signs like outside of my school was crazy. And so I think that it is definitely like a hard pill to swallow that like these people will just be more openly hateful now because they feel like they have purpose to, especially in my own community. As of my own personal experience of the event, it does feel very isolating because besides me and like my one other friend that were like in the crowd very close to him when it happened, I don't know of a lot of UVU students that were there and had similar events to me at the day. And especially since like I'm not a conservative, so I don't get anything out of going to the Charlie Kirk Memorial and like putting flowers down for him and like crying over the giant picture of his tiny little face.
Mhm.
I don't like get any sort of like I don't like feel like I don't know, I'm just not like consoled by the two giant American flags that are hanging in my school now. And I don't feel consoled by just like the stuff that the conservatives in the crowd are probably feeling. Like there's definitely a sense of like community mourning, but not really. I just don't feel attached to any of that. And
Gotcha.
so that's been
Gotcha.
kind of a hard thing to process with that event is because with this event is because like amidst all of the like sadness that my community has felt, it's like I know a lot of people personally that are being affected by the fact that they're trying to paint the shooter out to be like groomed by like trans women. Like I have people like in my personal life that are like going that like don't feel safe going on campus because they have increased police security
Mm.
and because like people are being just like more openly hateful now to like queer people on campus and to like minority groups. So it's like it's been like a weird pull of like seeing my whole community mourning and supposed to and like my seeing my university hold like a vigil for unity and then being like we just want everyone on campus to like, have the ability to speak their voices and to feel sad about this event. But it's like there's not really any space for me to really speak my voice because I'm not necessarily like going to connect with the mourning for Charlie Kirk of
Yeah.
it all.
Yeah,
But I am sad that I had to be there, and I'm sad that I went through a traumatic event.
100%. To that point, you've circled on a lot of the conditions where something like this might happen. And in terms of what gun culture is like in Utah, are there a lot of hunters? Are there a lot of hobbyists? Are there like, I know in the South, we'll have like these conventions where people come. I
Hmm.
don't know if that might have a table at Utah. Ultimately, what is the gun culture like in Utah?
I would say that it's probably about as prevalent as it is in the South. Like I lived in Texas for like half of my life, and so it is not any less like the gun culture is very strong here. UVU itself is an open carry campus, and like I think
An
like
open
of like
carry
a
I did not
campus?
poll.
know that. Okay.
I believe it's either I believe it is open carry,
Okay.
but it is like a campus that you can bring guns onto, as are most campuses in Utah. And it is like I do just see people open carrying all the time.
Wow.
There are tons of gun stores on every street. Like they have gun conventions here. Like it's not like like it definitely is pretty prevalent. And that was actually an interesting part of some of the confusion of that day was like someone like of that day like in the event like
Mhm.
a man was like initially tackled in the crowd because when Charlie Kirk was shot, he pulled his gun out. And this guy is like a kind of like he's more of like a guy that like likes to pull his gun out at political events on both sides of the spectrum to get arrested. But if it had just been like a conservative in the crowd like pulling his gun out to be the good guy with a gun, like, that caused a lot of confusion for the police in apprehending the actual shooter.
Totally.
And it's like I do have my suspicions that UVU that students at UVU, especially the conservative ones, are just going to be open carrying more on my campus
Hmm.
because of this event, because they want to make a point or whatever. What I think my school should do is just ban guns on campus
Yeah.
because it is crazy that they're allowed. But it's like, it definitely, uh, Mormons do own guns. They own a lot of them.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Gotcha.
So, as we are, if you have anything, please stop me.
I was honestly just really curious as to, the day of the event when everything happened, because you did say that there is open carry allowed at the school. What
Hmm.
part of you was surprised or shocked, after you had been able to process everything, that there was a gun allowed at the event, or you were allowed to have, because like that,
Or were you even surprised?
yeah.
I wasn't surprised at all. I going to I just kind of assume that, especially at events like that, I already assumed that most people in the crowd would be carrying. I mean, it's a fear that I have just like being outside in general at Utah. Like, it's always in the back of my mind that like a lot of these Mormon conservatives do just own guns. And so it's like I wasn't very shocked. I wasn't, I mean, like a lot of like what me and my friends were talking about, like day of when the event happened was like I wouldn't be surprised. Like obviously after the details have come out about like how the shooter did do this, but like the day of when we had no information about it, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if he just like walked onto campus with the gun and then just walked off, because it's like you can just do that on my school campus. So I wasn't really surprised that like I was obviously surprised that like Charlie Kirk got shot. And I think like the initial shock was that like I had lived through a shooting event, but I wasn't surprised that it could be something that happened because even before it happened and when I had just gotten there and was like in the crowd, it was in the back of my mind as something that was a possibility, especially after the No Kings protest that happened a couple months ago. And with like, a guy getting shot and killed there, like it has definitely like every protest I've been to since then it has been on the back of my mind that this is something that could happen.
100%.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
Um, as we do kind of come to a close, I'm going to ask you a question that I don't expect you to have the answer to it. Neither of us do. Um, what happens next? What do you think happens next for the University of Utah? What happens next for you? Um, and yeah, I'll leave you with that. What happens next for the University of Utah? And
Utah Valley
oh,
University.
Utah Valley. Excuse
No,
me. I'm so sorry.
no, you're fine, you're fine. What I think happens next is probably a lot of what we've already been seeing in the past year, because I do feel like conservatives especially are going to use this as a good reason or as good proof that university campuses are too woke. And that it is just, I am just expecting like come January and February, like in the next legislative session, I just am expecting to see more bills that are passed, like more DEI legislation that cuts funding for my school even more, that, makes it even harder for I'm just expecting it to mostly, in terms of how it comes down on UVU, I'm expecting there to be just like more policing of like what is considered like too woke for my campus, sort of. I know that there's already been like a lot of fear among like faculty and students, especially in like the humanities programs and like that aren't in like business fields, that are worried about like their programming getting cut. And my school has already like dropped a ton of majors that have like had not like have had like less than like 40 active students in them. And so I do imagine that just like a lot of classes are going to be cut. And I think that like, not even just at UVU, but like at all the universities, in my state in general. Like I do just think that like there will be more DEI legislation against universities that cuts a lot of like very valuable programming. And in terms of like what happens next for me and or for like the community in general, I think that like me personally, this is not going to be something I recover from anytime soon. And I also just think that like there is just going to be like a lot more fear when it comes to going to events like this and like if I go to protest after this or if I do anything that's like political organizing, like it will just like still be on the back of my mind in a way that it already has been. I think there is going to be just a lot more fear in the community in general from the left when it comes to like I've already seen people that like do certain things in the community that have had to cut back on like openly talking about the community organizing they're doing and have had to cut back on like providing like details for like locations of events that they're doing stuff at. Like I think that in the community and for me personally, like there's just going to be a lot more trepidation and definitely a lot more like fear when it comes to politically organizing, which sucks.
It does suck.
Yeah, yeah.
Very much so. Well, that I think will conclude our interview. We appreciate it a lot.
hmm
If there is anything else that you wanted to say or had left out, please do let us know.
Um, I'm not sure. I think I touched on everything I wanted to. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course,
Thank you, thank you. Whoa, whoa, that was a lot. But it's good that we talked to that person.
Yes, it was. Why are you having that big of a reaction?
Hassan and Saji, talking about a Charlie Kirk.
No,
thing.
it was heavy, but I'm glad that we had an experience like that. And I hope that, it enlightened a lot of our viewers and gave context and information where people see fit.
And arguably a better conversation than anything having to do with nice, soft internet feed. For sure. For sure not I'm not upset about the fact that we had to talk about that. In fact, I'm privileged.
Interview's canceled with Doja Cat, by the way.
Whoa.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Whoa. Oh my.
Yeah. Sorry.
I mean,
if
we're comparing tragedies,
we're not. Let's not. This has been mainstream media.
This time
telling the truth straight to your face.